Welcome back to OneVerse. We're happy to be with you today. We have Todd Hostetler, pastor at City on a Hill Teaching Center. And with him is Jeff Milslegel, also from City on a Hill. And today they're going to be discussing a verse given to them at random. And Jeff, I'm going to give the verse to you first. It is a New Testament verse, and it is Mark 11:23. And that says, "For assuredly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things he says will be done, he will have whatever he says." So that's Mark 11:23.
Yeah, wow, this isn't an easy verse, is it? Because there's just so much in here, and I want to give you a little bit of context here before we get to actually verse 23. They mentioned there's this fig tree that they run into, or earlier Jesus, I guess it was the day before, had actually curses the fig tree, and now we see it and it's dried up. And Peter said, "Look, Rabbi, the fig tree which you cursed has withered away." And Jesus, of course, answered and said to them, "Have faith in God." And then we get to this verse. "Assuredly, I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be removed and cast into the sea, does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things he says will be done, he will have whatever he says." Now, there is this temptation, I think, to sometimes take this verse, I believe, out of context and just all of a sudden say, well, I can do anything I want. I just make the pronouncement and believe hard enough, and presto, it's there. And I'm just not in that camp. I really think you have to keep all things in context, and particularly understand you want to be men and women that are walking in the will of God, that your life is following him, that you're serving him the best way you know how. And in your service, in your struggle of serving him, and you think you know what you're trying to do, you run across the mountain, whatever it is. You have to have faith and believe that God's going to remove that if you're going to continue on the mission God's given you to do. See, we don't want to, we take this out of context sometimes, I think, and want to have things removed just to please us and make things better for us. Well, that may or may not always be the case. But if you're doing what God's called you to do, you're walking in his will, and you run across some mountain, some obstacle, whatever you want to say, and that is stopping you, that's what you need to stand in faith and believe for. And yes, I do believe he will remove those mountains when you're operating in faith with him. But again, a lot has to do with our own selfishness, our own heart that is right with him, and then we're walking in his will. I mean, I could give you different examples when you're not walking his will and there's an obstacle and that you're trying to pray that thing away and it's like not happening, but you're not walking in his will in the first place. Well, that's not what we're talking about here. This isn't to be used as a selfish thing. This is an idea that's used in service to him. So anyhow, that's my take on that. It's one of those little tougher verses. So let's just see what you got there, Todd. See if you can make better sense of this than I did. Go ahead, man.
Doubtful there, but this is one of those verses that when Donna mentioned it, your heart goes flutter because it's just such an exciting verse and there is so much richness that's there. Here's what I want you to do. I'm going to read this and I'm going to emphasize a few things to you, because when you're reading something in the Word of God, when something is repeated and it's repeated again, that means it's a point of emphasis. That's the Word of God. That is Jesus himself letting you know, hello, this is important, Todd. Make sure you get this down. So I'm going to read this and then listen to my point of emphasis in this very familiar verse. "For assuredly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things he says will be done, he will have whatever he says." Now, isn't that interesting? We know how important faith is. We have to have faith. And in this verse, what Jesus is saying is, listen, if you say and believe and do not doubt, you will have what you say. But the mere fact that we focus on the have to believe, and certainly that is definitely true. You have to believe, no question about it. But Jesus is letting us know how important it is what you say. We have the Word of God, and if we will speak the Word of God, there is power of life and death in the tongue. And this is just revealing to us the importance of what you say. If there is something in your life that does not line up with the Word of God, you need to believe the Word of God. But then it's important that you keep saying it. Why? Well, we also know from the book of Romans chapter 10 that we are told faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. The more that you hear, the more that you speak, and your spiritual ears hear what your actual physical voice says, it does great things to your faith. So we have to believe and not doubt, but it comes from saying, when we speak, and as we speak the word of God, and as we speak those things that we know that are true, it stirs up our hearts so that we can believe and not doubt. It's 3 to 1. 3 times it uses the word says compared to 1 time uses the word believe. It just shows us how important. What are you saying? What are you saying? If you say the word of God, the more you speak the word of God and say those things, the more it's going to increase your faith, and you will believe, and those mountains shall be removed. Jeff, why don't you bring us home on this one?
Well, you know, that's a really good take on this, Todd. I really like that idea. And it just reminds me of how important it is that we're speaking things into our life that are proper, that are God honoring, and that are accurate. That's, you know, sometimes we kind of really get down on ourselves and, you know, oh, I'll never do this and I'll never make that work and I'll never buy. I mean, we have to eliminate that type of thinking constantly and speak the right words. And it applies to other people. I want to speak righteous things into other situations and other people. So anyhow, yeah, there's an awful lot to this idea of speaking truth, isn't there? Hey, thanks so much for watching OneVerse. We're so glad to have you tuning in and watching us today. We hope to see you next time as Todd and I both take a look at another OneVerse in Scripture.